Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started, trying to honor our start time and your promptness in joining us. Please, as you do join, go to the chat function and introduce yourself there. That'll help us know who's on and help the presenters orient their comments. Welcome to the first session of the 2021 National Network for the Transportation Workforce Series, Empowering the New Mobility Workforce. The program is organized by the Northeast Transportation Workforce Center based at the University of Vermont and Rutgers University, and the National Transportation Training Directors Network. We're sponsored today by the National Network for the Transportation Workforce, a collaboration of 4 regional university-based centers. And every other Wednesday, we'll be sponsoring a new program in this series through December, and we'll provide you with a calendar of those additional events at the end of today's forum. As noted, please introduce yourself in the chat as you come on. The chat function should be in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Note, this program will be recorded. We will be providing links to the recording so you can share it with your colleagues and those who weren't able to make it in real time. Throughout the session, you're welcome to enter questions, again, in the chat box, and please submit all the questions to the host. There's a unit to click on who the questions go to. We'll take those questions at the end of the presentations. Today, we're going to be looking at growing the highway workforce with a focus on the Innovative Byroads program at the Indiana Department of Transportation, working with the Indiana Construction Roundtable Foundation. This was launched this past summer, and we're pleased that they're here today to share some of the learning and challenges from that experience. Our first presenter will be Chris Price, who began his career working as a civil engineer, primarily in the highway and stormwater markets. Welcome, Chris. His career shifted in 2008 when he began working as the executive director of the Indiana Construction Roundtable. He currently serves as the president for both the Indiana Construction Roundtable and the Indiana Construction Roundtable Foundation. Chris is going to be joined by David Dalton. He is Indiana Department of Transportation's Director of Workforce Development. He's building programs for both youth and adults that align with many of the desired skills for the highway construction and maintenance fields. And David brings more than 10 years of workforce development experience to the job, including his role as the work-based learning manager for Goodwill of Central and Southern Indiana, where he developed customized internships to meet employer demand. Again, after their presentations, we'll open up to questions. Please enter them in the chat at any time. And with that, we will move right into our first presentation.
All right, can everybody see my screen okay?
Thanks, looks
all right,
good.
Good deal. So yeah, like Glenn said, I'm Chris Price. I serve as the president of the Indiana Construction Roundtable Foundation. And I'm just going to start out by giving everybody a little background of who we are and kind of an overview of what this program is, just a quick hitter overview. Feel free to ask questions throughout and we can keep it conversational. I'll get boring if we don't. So please feel free. Before I get into that, though, I did want to do a couple of call outs. We do have several people, or a couple of people from the NCCER here attending, and wanted to give them a little recognition because since our start, the NCCR has been our partner, and they've really been critical with kind of forming the programs that I'm going to talk to you about today, as well as our Build Your Future program. So for any state that's considering programs like this, you know, NCCR is a good place, a good first call to make. The other shout out I want to make, or acknowledgement I'd like to make, is just the partnership that our organization has with the state of Indiana. So our group came to be in 2015, and I wanted to highlight that we're able to do the work that we do thanks to an appropriation in our state's general budget. So we received funding through the state's general budget. We also received a grant through INDOT and through Federal Highway Administration to launch our first federal to launch our first BY Roads program. So a lot of partners that we work with to kind of make this come together. On the screen, what you're seeing is the logo for, well, there's 3 logos, and that can be confusing. The ICR Foundation is our nonprofit entity. So this is a 501c3 that has the mission to empower people to pursue a career in construction. And so it's a people-focused mission. As a part of that mission, everything that we do is what we call labor neutral. So we work with employers of all types. We work with employers that are in vertical construction markets, horizontal construction markets, residential markets, and of course union employers and employers who are open shop. So we have to maintain that neutrality with all the programs that we do. So then the other 2 logos that you're seeing, we have our BY programming, and the way I would think of this is aimed at adults. So it's a training program that I'm going to talk about that's for people over the age of 18. Build Your Future is a bucket of programming that's aimed for people under the age of 18. So we're in a lot of schools around the state. We meet with students throughout the year and help the schools to develop programs as well. So a little bit about our BY program. I want to bring up some notes here. So this was the first program that, the first training program that our organization developed in 2018. So generally what this program is, and we're going to talk about BY and BY Roads, but our BY program was the first thing that we did out of the gate. And what we do here is it's 6 to 8 weeks of training, and it's pre-employment training. What we're doing here is we're teaching NCCER's core curriculum over a period of time. The intent of this is to provide people with some basic skills training and to address the skills gap that people need to address in order to feel confident to connect with a career in construction. So students going through this program earn their OSHA 10 certificate in addition to certificates through the NCCER core curriculum. Typically, it would be a class size of 20 students meeting twice a week, oftentimes in the evenings. We have regular employer visits throughout the class. So the class typically lasts 6 to 8 weeks. Employers come throughout. We try to have a minimum of 4 employer visits, but that's usually 4 to 6 employer visits as the class progresses. And it culminates with a hiring event at the end. So what we're doing throughout this class is we're preparing people for careers in construction through skills training, soft skills training, resume development, mock interviews, that kind of thing, so that when we get to the finish line and people earn their credentials, then we're able to schedule a hiring event where the students all have one-on-one interviews with the employers and oftentimes walk out with multiple job offers. I think some of the uniqueness about what we're doing is we partner with community centers around the state. We work with probation officers. We work with reentry programs. We work with a host of organizations that are connected to people who would benefit from the high-paying careers that our industry offers. So as such, we focus a lot on people who are dealing with poverty, and the pilot program that we're going to talk about was no different, no exception. We do work a lot with veterans. We work with previously incarcerated people and currently incarcerated people. We're actually offering programs. Our first program just launched in a prison in Indiana, and so we're proud of the work that we're doing in that space too. There's another slide that will report out on some of those outcomes that we have. Oops. So the BY Roads overview is everything that we do with our BY program. So NCCR's core curriculum is about 72 hours of classroom training. That's classroom and hands-on training combined. But what we do with BY Roads is we add in modules that are specific to the highway sector. So this class is solely focused on highway construction. It's taught by an instructor from the highway sector. We have class visits throughout with employers and their labor partners from the highway sector. And ideally, having a visit at a job site is what we'd like to do, because there's no better way to get a person excited about a career in highway construction than going onto that job site, experiencing the walk of the site and the smells and everything that comes on a highway construction site. That's what I love and what our students love. NCCER, you heard the shout out at the beginning, but I really didn't explain a lot of this, of who they are. So NCCER is the largest curriculum developer and offer the most certifications and value to our industry nationwide and even internationally. So as we're going through our program, the value that I always explain to our students is that they're going to earn 4 credentials through our program, but those credentials are going to stay with them and they will be recognized wherever they go throughout the country. So while we would like to keep all of our students here in Indiana to fill the jobs that we have, the reality is a student can earn these credentials and jump down to Texas, work on the Gulf, work with TxDOT, work, you know, wherever they choose to go. So that's a benefit of utilizing NCCR. It's the largest registry of craftspeople in the world. The last time I checked, they were over 7 million craft professionals in their registry, and so it's a good starting point for a person in their career. The BY Roads curriculum. So I talked a little bit about core curriculum. So in this class, everybody gets the same as core curriculum, but we've added the identification of equipment used in heavy highway. There's work zone safety training, certified flagger certificate. We do CPR training, and then there's some financial literacy training, which is really critical, especially for the highway sector, when you consider that depending on the state you're living in, you may have some winter months where you're unemployed. And so financial coaching and preparing for those times is critical to the students going through our program. We also have an accountability score. So what I always tell the students is if they are committed to getting through the program, they can get through the program. The reality is people can retake the modules that they're learning in class, and the employers aren't going to know the better. They won't know if you had to retake a module here or there. But what we do share with our employers is the accountability scores that our students earn. So on day 1, people start out with 100 points. There are deductions based on how well they are communicating, if they're running late, if they're going to miss class. We have 0 tolerance for a violation of our substance abuse policy, so that's immediate termination. And as long as people can maintain a score of over 70, they can get through the class. If they dip below 70, then we terminate their enrollment or participation in class. And the employers value this because if they're looking at hiring someone and they're maybe on the fence, they can look at the accountability score and make a judgment call. And that did come into play, has come into play with this class and with other classes that we've done. So real quickly, here's kind of a summary of the last report that we saw on our outcomes. So if you, you know, one of the things that the state will do for the state of Indiana will do for us is they can look at unemployment records and they can see how students are tracking with training programs throughout the state. Our program met the top performance criterion established by the state, so the exceptional performance criterion, which roughly means that 83% of our students, roughly, and this may vary now, but 83% of our students complete the program. 77% of our students who graduate are still employed 6 months following the class. And on average, we're at a wage of $20.58 an hour at 6 months following the class. So we these are good outcomes and outcomes I'm really proud of. And especially considering the demographics of the students that we work with. So roughly half of our students have backgrounds with felonies. The highway sector offers opportunity. I mean, thankfully, that's a good thing about our industry, is that our employers are willing to work with people with backgrounds. So this is a good place to connect people to a career and to reduce recidivism rates around the state. 72% of our students are minorities. Now, if you look at the diversity of our industry, it's not nearly this good. So we're really doing well with recruitment of diverse people, including females. Females make up about 3% of our skilled trades workers, but 20% of our students are female. So we're really proud of that. And then 15% of our students don't have a high school diploma or equivalency, but our program does partner with adult basic education providers around the state. And that's a goal of our program, is that if we are working with someone who doesn't have a high school diploma, how can we connect them to that high school equivalency while they're going through the program? And we've had some real success stories in that space too. So those are all of the slides that I prepared. I'll go ahead and turn it over to David Dalton now. And I'm going to jump back in here on a future slide with David. We're going to get some feedback about the program too, some lessons learned.
All right, good afternoon. Can everyone see my screen and hear me?
Looks good, David.
Perfect, thank you. So we're going to talk a lot about our pilot program with BY Roads, but I also, if time allows, I'd like to just touch on briefly some other workforce pipelines that we're connected with, which I think are important to elaborate on and what we're doing as a state to really develop pathways for highway construction and maintenance. So BY Roads, you know, when I started at the state 3 years ago, I really had to spend a lot of time doing outreach and listening to our heavy highway contracting community, as well as other states. So I began contacting various states to learn about programs that they had stood up for adults that were either unemployed or underemployed. And from what I learned and from being in adult education prior to my time at the state, is that there were a lot of things happening in different states, but really nothing focused entirely on heavy highway construction in Indiana. And if there was, I wasn't aware of it. So the concept began to incorporate heavy highway modules into a curriculum, a pre-existing curriculum, which, as Chris mentioned, NCCR being the curriculum that they've used and has been recognized throughout our state and many other states. And so based on these discussions, both with internal and external stakeholders, we developed a statewide highway workforce advisory group. And we began to learn kind of what those pain points were for training, hiring, attracting, and all those challenges that we face as an industry. And so we began with how can we learn best practices with classroom visits, lunch and learns, you know, project site tours, any kind of work and learn experience. And so this is kind of the genesis of how these discussions began and how we decided upon a curriculum and what modules to incorporate into the heavy highway program. And some of these stakeholders here, this is not a comprehensive list, but these are all organizations that we had reached out to start these discussions and build this highway workforce advisory group. And earlier this year, probably many of you know, there was a notice for funding released through Federal Highway and the Highway Construction Workforce Partnership. So most of these organizations listed on this slide here were very supportive and offered letters of support and were engaged in many of the discussions that we had. So just a high level view of our partners. Again, this isn't a comprehensive list, but we are continuing to build these relationships in order to support our workforce needs. So our goal as a state agency was really to find a way to fund up to 30 students. We wanted to put them through this pre-employment highway skills training program, BY Roads, and not only pay for the tuition, but also eliminate some of the barriers to completion and post completion. So And we'll talk a little bit about that here just in a few moments. But obviously a goal of ours was to increase the highway workforce diversity. We want to continue to partner with industry and our communities to plan and build our infrastructure and support unemployed and underemployed Hoosiers in highway construction skills attainment and employment. Our class started in June and went to September. And an important thing that I think is to mention here is there's a significant need for these jobs. And right now we're in a pretty interesting time as a state and as a nation, but we have this next level roads funding, and essentially that is $60 billion for a 20-year road, bridge, and street plan. So there's a real need to fill these jobs, and as individuals are in the sunset of their career, we need to find ways to tap into new pipelines. And really that's what the BY Roads, along with these other workforce programs, were dedicated to. So Chris highlighted this, the heavy highway curriculum. Just to reiterate, based on the conversations that we had, it was really safety driven, from OSHA to construction site safety to work zone safety, and then CPR, first aid, and also bolting in that financial literacy, which we had a partner come in and teach about savings and how to build their credit, which quite frankly, many of the students were unaware of, and those that were very interested in that topic. So Chris had shared also that these classroom visits, they've done such tremendous work through the traditional BY program. What we wanted to do as not only a funder, but an employer, is to introduce our role and what we do as an agency, our structures, the types of projects that we work on, and highlight career pathways within maintenance and construction. So kind of really a snapshot and a day in the life of what it is that we do. Simultaneously, throughout the course, we had the heavy highway contractors come in and do the exact same thing, a real high level of what it is that they do, their organization structure, really bringing in laborers, as well as whether they're open shop, closed shop, really just to give the students a menu of options to choose from, and an awareness that they hadn't had before related to highway. This right here, this is the top left is Jamarlin King. He is a unit supervisor, and he brought a truck over for the students to check out one day, and he was such a great representative of our agency in a number of ways, but they were really interested in learning about what it is that we do, and so we were able to kind of show them around one of our vehicles. Below that is one of our staff actually doing the CPR and first aid. And then to the right, that is the graduating class, the 6 students that completed. And then to the far right in that photo is the instructor. So there's a lot of lessons learned, and I think this is where Chris and I have a lot to discuss. But this class was held in Central Indianapolis, and we had, I want to say, 32 applicants from across the state, from Northeast Indiana to Southwest Indiana. We had 10 individuals enroll. And what's interesting is the individuals that weren't located in Central Indiana, we explained, it might not make sense for them to travel an hour and a half for 2 nights a week. But I will say this, there were two students that did that. And thankfully, we were able to provide gas cards to help eliminate transportation barriers for those students, but it really demonstrated their commitment to just showing up weekly to a class that was, an hour or so away from them. So we had 10 individuals enroll, and of those 6, we had 6 complete. I will say there are students that have expressed, the ones that haven't completed, an interest in finishing the course, but we're working through those details now. Chris, do you have anything to add to this slide?
Yeah, a couple observations. So you see 32 applicants and 10 enrolled. If you're considering a program, this is pretty normal for us. Mm-hmm. If we want a class of 20, we know we need to recruit about 60 applicants. That's just typically where our show up rate is. We're trying to improve on that, but that's what we're seeing. So we didn't see anything real unusual there. I was and am a little disappointed in the 6 out of 10 completing. That's really not where we want to be, and there's a couple reasons for this. We had 2 students who had significant healthcare issues or health issues during class. One with COVID, one was hospitalized and had to end class. So we had a couple of outliers, but the other thing that I'm wondering is, did we make the curriculum for this class so hard that it's hurting our ability to graduate people from class? So that's a consideration. I don't think we know that answer yet, but yeah.
So speaking of the length of class, we held it for 10 weeks. And again, I think this is something that we're going to revisit in the future as we look towards another launch, I believe in spring before construction season. Are the modules that we have selected, can we modify them? What would make the most sense? Finding the right instructor as well. I think that's a key aspect of success, and making sure that they're familiar enough with the topic and the content, and can make those student connections as well. So I think those are some things that we took away from that aspect of the training. Chris?
Yeah, the instructor challenge is a real consideration for highway training. So some of the issues that we had is that if we're doing a training during construction season, everybody's very busy and working long days. So it's hard to find someone from industry to teach it. We reached out to all of our employer partners, and we had a good list of employers to pull from, and could not identify an instructor. We ended up tagging a high school teacher who was qualified to teach, and he was who taught this class. Another issue that you may run into with finding an instructor is that they need to be computer literate and competent. They have to use PowerPoint slides. They need to run all of the testing is done online, and that system is somewhat complicated. So you really, if you're thinking about a typical highway construction worker, you don't automatically jump to someone who's going to be real computer savvy necessarily. So finding that right fit for an instructor can be a challenge, and it was for us.
Yeah, and I'll just tack on, we launched this class in June. Ideally, we would have had it in February, before construction season. We were kind of in a position where we wanted to move forward with this. We had planned it out, but the timing of it could be better, I will say. And that's where we're looking ahead with making some of these modifications to really make the class hopefully improve upon what we've already done so far. Employer engagement, again, I think Chris kind of touched on this, with the timing, if you're in construction season, getting partners there after a long workday can be a real challenge. We thankfully had some real interest. I mean, I will say our contracting partners have come to the table. There's a real interest in this work, but there's also challenges that they face and that we face. And I think practical application of what you learn in a classroom and taking it onto a job site is important. And that's something that I really would like to see happen with our next cohort. Chris, would you like to add anything to that?
I agree with everything you said. And another piece of feedback that we get from employers, from our employer partners who are hiring our students, is that even though we're doing, a 10-week training program preparing people for employment, they're still finding that when people come out of class and they go onto a job site, that people don't fully understand what to expect when coming to work. So I think we could improve our program by providing, if we're able to get to a point where we can provide paid work experience, more job site visits, more things like that, that could help our outcomes down the road, but that can get complicated, especially on in the highway sector. So yeah, the engagement in class was really good. I felt like we did have good support from the industry.
So last but not least, in regards to the BY roads, student barriers. I will say this class, pretty much covered every barrier that you could possibly imagine, from transportation to backgrounds to legal fees associated with license reinstatement and housing. I believe we had 2 students faced with housing issues during the course. And so, you know, I think Chris had mentioned this up front, the population that they serve and have trained, we're aware that there are barriers, but, for a pilot program, this really kind of stretched us to our limits in a lot of ways. And I think there are ways that we can continue to help support students and leverage some of the dollars that we do have, as well as some of the community partners that are offering wraparound services. Those are things that I think of as we look ahead to the next cohort and supporting those individuals and ensuring not only they complete, but they find employment and stay employed.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been involved with a class that had as many barriers as the students in this class did. It was a real stress test for our program, for a pilot program. I mean, we really had some challenges. And, I can kind of talk through one of the students. His name was Floyd. And, some lessons that we learned with Floyd and that I always share with our staff is whenever we see a challenge or a barrier to success, run towards it, grab it, and try to deal with it right away. Don't steer away from conflict. And so on our first day of class, I met Floyd and was really impressed with him. As I was driving home, I pulled out of the center and I saw Floyd walking over the White River. He was walking over the bridge, and I thought, okay, what's going on? So I called him the next day, found out more about his situation. He was a veteran who was homeless. He had a car, but the car was not operable. It had significant damage. And he had a number of legal issues that he was dealing with as well. So the amount of resources and time that we had to commit to Floyd, that we wanted to commit to Floyd, was really significant. And so when you think about this program, there needs to be consideration for how to deal with those barriers. We had to connect, we connected Floyd to Indy Legal Aid, which is a free legal aid service. He was assigned an attorney to deal with some expungement issues, and he was able to get those issues resolved prior to the end of class. We've also got, as an organization, 3 social workers on staff. We call them navigators, but they're available to help people dealing with whatever challenges they're experiencing. And all the students in this class had barriers. So they were busy, and I think anyone who's considering starting a program like this, having a plan for barriers is essential.
Absolutely. And I think this also comes down to, and maybe, how we reach students prior to when they start, and understanding where they're coming from prior to, so we're ensuring their success, because obviously this program is designed to lift people up and to train them, but to really build confidence and getting them on a job site and moving that needle to make sure that they feel confident and ready to go into the workforce. And hopefully in this particular case, we're looking at highway construction and maintenance. So I'm going to segue briefly from the lessons learned, since we have a little bit of time, just to highlight, a couple other programs. Hopefully everybody can still see my screen here. But I just want to briefly touch on this because I think this is really interesting. We are partnered with a couple high schools in the state of Indiana that have rolled out a horizontal pathway, and Chris has been part of this discussion as well. But Hamilton Heights High School and Garrett High School in Northeast Indiana, they have really kind of spearheaded this whole effort to train the NCCR core, but then the entirety of heavy highway, as to where we have pulled in only modules for our adult class with the understanding that these are unemployed and underemployed individuals ready to work. Well, this particular focus is a state earn and learn. Hamilton Heights High School, Garrett has a very similar program, but in grade 11, they're earning the core. They're learning all those aspects, and then they choose whether or not they're going to go into a vertical or horizontal construction. The horizontal is a new pathway that was rolled out. They are learning heavy highway level 1 and level 2. In addition to that, we have incorporated INDOT curriculum of stormwater management and erosion control into the classroom, as well as construction earthworks, which is part of our certified technician program. So students are earning all these certifications and again, being provided with a menu of options. And from that, by the time they graduate, they'll have 18 transferable credits into post-secondary at Ivy Tech. So they can either go into the workforce with these skills, or they can transition and continue their education, which is, it's a really good opportunity for a person that's young and ready to either work or learn more. So over the course of the summer, there was a train the trainer. So 5 high schools came together with their instructors, and they learned aspects of heavy highway curriculum, OSHA training, stormwater management. They learned inspection, surveying, and this crash course for these high school teachers to go then and take back and share with their students. So they just added in skid steer and mini excavator. So a really robust curriculum for students at age 17, 18. Here's a few photos. This is them, Hamilton Heights High School students on our North Split. It's one of our larger projects in the state right now, closed to the public, but we had these students come on site and learn a little bit about that project. Down below is the Train the Trainer, which is they're at one of their partners in a testing lab. And then on the far right is Hamilton Heights High School. They have a sandbox, which is incredible. These students are learning the equipment. I was able to go out there with a handful of partners and watch these students learn this equipment. So I will segue once more, and I'll leave it at that because I think this is also important. We're also working with Justice Involved Citizens, and we're providing opportunities within our own agency to transition to highway technicians. So this is a program that's near and dear to my heart, and I know Chris is doing some really great work with some pre-release training, and I think there's some potential discussion there as well. But we have been working with those individuals, and from this particular effort, again, I just like to highlight untapped talent pipelines, but we've had 20 total referrals from 7 unique referring community partners, 8 hires, 1 promoted to a unit supervisor. So up above is Jay King. Jay, as I mentioned earlier, was actually the person that met with those students. So it was a really great day where he could connect with them and share his story and some of the challenges that he faced after he was released. But again, we've had 2 promotions. It's a great program. And so these are just some of the things that we're doing in Indiana to really move the needle and support individuals, both at a youth and adult level, to gain access to skills and opportunities. Final thoughts, I'm just going to leave it as community partnerships have been essential. I think, Chris, I don't want to speak for you, but I think partnerships are one of the most important aspects of making this work.
Absolutely.
Always ask yourself who else needs a seat at the table. That's also important. And if there's training that you are needing to skill up your own workforce, figure out a way to ingratiate it into a classroom. So those are kind of my final takeaways. I believe that's the last slide. Really appreciate the opportunity to present. Thank you, Glenn, and the National Network for Transportation Workforce.
Great. Thanks, both David and Chris, and not unexpectedly, it solicited a bunch of comments and questions. And I think we'll dispense with the overriding one that we get on anything that we engage in now is how has the pandemic impacted the program, recruitment, operation, anything quick, to share that might be helpful.
I can do a quick one. We actually had a student who got COVID. Floyd, the guy that I was talking about at the beginning, ended up coming down with COVID towards the end of class. It could have been a lot worse than what it was, but You know, we did take precautions in class. We have everybody spaced out with social distancing. There was a mask requirement in the building while you're moving about, and thankfully that case was strict. You know, it was just Floyd. No one else was infected, but it is an issue, and you gotta take those precautions.
And the class was held in a pretty large space as well.
Yeah.
So there was plenty of room to space out. So that, I think that also helped. But yeah, right now I don't think there's a perfect recipe to tackle this issue because it's ongoing.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about the funding sources for that supported the program and how you put those together? Is it primarily the industry partners, or kind of what were all the buckets?
Well, for this program, thankfully, we were able to leverage federal highway funding. So on-the-job training supportive services dollars is really what was able to lift this program up. So we put in a statement of work. We put out a RFP and put this package together, bid it out. Chris and his team had a really great proposal. So we really only use federal highway funding to stand this program up. Now, as part of the notice for funding opportunity that was released early this year, you know, there was a requirement of a match, right? Not just in kind, but financial match. And that's one thing that we've been able to, you know, get into those preliminary discussions, and probably Chris can speak to this as well because he's been operating a training program since 2018, I believe, is getting those partners to invest in it. And the more outcomes that they see and employees that they have that are quality, the more they're willing to buy into it, support it, and then tell their friends about it, really. And so as of to date, we have funded this particular cohort and program, and we have now funding over the next couple of years, really, to support this effort as it continues to roll out and we build those partnerships for heavy highway. Chris, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, with our, and you know, first off, we're grateful for the funding and the opportunity through INDOT, through Federal Highway Administration. We're with our BY program, there's some other buckets of funding in Indiana that we do utilize. Indiana's got a program called Next Level Jobs, which is a great program. If you're a qualified training provider and there's a vetting process that you have to go through, and your course is approved, then you can leverage those funds to cover the tuition for the students. So we have a tuition set for students, and then we get that tuition reimbursed through a number of sources. But in Indiana, Next Level Jobs, and then partnering with adult basic education providers is another way that we're able to cover tuition.
Great. Chris, do you want to share your slides again briefly? There were some questions around the slide you had up that listed out the trainee accountability.
Oh, yeah, sure. I need to be enabled for that.
Okay.
There we go.
I think there was just general interest in getting that snapshot again, and then whether kind of how did you develop the guideline, the plan, and do you have anything more, you know, kind of substantive or formal that could be shared?
Yeah, so the way that we do this is you've got to be consistent. You've got to treat everybody the same in class. So if you've got, and so we just set that bar on day one, that if you are 1 minute late, I don't care if you're 2 minutes late, 3 minutes, whatever, it's 1 minute late, you're late. And if you didn't call, that's a 10-point deduction. If you do call or you text or you let us know that you might be a minute late, it's only 5-point deduction. But you really got to be consistent. And then what we do is every couple weeks, you write down that score and everybody sees where they are on their accountability score. I'll give a real world example of how this played out for one of our BY classes. We had a student who went through the program. David, you remember Nia. She went through the program, graduated. She had the opportunity to interview with INDOT, and she got a job offer with INDOT. Now, Nia had a background. And so with the background that she had, INDOT, as part of their due diligence, they wanted to find out, you know, what can you tell us as Nia's reference? And what I wanted to say was, oh my gosh, Nia was one of my favorite students. She was awesome. She was great to talk to, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, Nia did have a background. And so I looked at her accountability score and she had a 70. She just barely made it through that accountability score. And it was a deal breaker. She didn't get the job. So I share that story with all the students who come through our program, is that these accountability scores matter. Employers use them, and you need, you know, so what we're really trying to do is just create healthy habits for our students. So when they go on to the job, they know that 15 minutes early is on time in construction, and we're, you know, we're starting to build those good habits.
Okay. There was a question on whether David, you could share the RFP out.
Yeah, just my email. Please share it, Glenn.
Okay.
And, anybody that wants to reach out, I'm happy to walk them through that.
Terrific. We'll get that up, and we'll post your contact and Chris's in the message that'll go out to everybody afterwards as well. And that kind of rolls in, Chris, to and David, this whole idea of retention for folks as they go through the program and then out. Many of them came in, as you said, with many challenges. Do you work at all with the placement of them and how some of those how some of that assistance can be furthered, since the needs don't go away? Hopefully, you know, they're learning and great, but transportation, you know, if you don't have transportation for the program, you don't have transportation for work. So what's that kind of connectivity and enhancement of those as they go out into hopefully the workforce?
I can start, and David, you can add on. Well, you know, kind of the general way that we handle class and handle those job placements is you want to give everybody the opportunity, first off, to have a resume and to give them feedback on the resume. And then prior to the actual interviews, the hiring day, doing mock interviews and giving students feedback. So what we did with this class, we had, there were several people from INDOT, people from our staff. We had people that came into the class who didn't know the students, and we all had evaluation forms for everyone that we were going to interview. And it was just a round robin where, you know, the students went from table 1 to table 2. They rotated around. They interviewed with all of these strangers who they didn't know. And then we gave them feedback on the evaluation cards on how that interaction went and whether we thought we would hire them if as a prospective employer. So that was the practice and the initial feedback that they had. Then what we do with the employer day is that same process. Now it's for real, and you've got the employers there, but they have the same evaluation cards that our mock interviewers had. And so what we do with that is, you know, a person may go through and they have 5 interviews. Well, we summarize all the results for how those interactions went. And then within a couple of days of the actual interviews, we email each student and say, here's a summary. Just imagine like speed dating or something, but here's a summary of how your interviews went. It looks like you have a connection with Milestone and EMB and INDOT, and our recommended next steps would be to reach out, you know, to their HR directors. Here's their contact information. So we are pretty hands-on, and get them to that point where they kind of know what to do next, and they have the feedback and they have a list of hot leads.
I'll just highlight a partner on this slide because it's still sharing, but Indiana Constructors Incorporated. They are a huge partner in all of this because they are the member association for our heavy highway contractors. You know, and Richard and Julia Polston have been tremendous partners in making those connections for students. So without their support and connections, that's been incredibly helpful. one thing I'll say, when you get into this, and this is kind of from past experience, individuals faced with barriers tend to be a transient population. They're hard to get a hold of. Their phone might be shut off. They might job hop. You just don't know. So it's good to make those personal connections, human to human, with the student, but simultaneously the partner and the employer, having them report back to you to understand that this person is doing well on the job, or they're maybe having some challenges. That allows you to get ahead of it to ensure that the student's successful and that they're actually a good fit for the employer. And those relationships are essential in all of it, because self-reporting can be a challenge, as to where when you're working with a partner, they can provide direct feedback. And that, for this particular grant funding, it is a metric that we have to track, is, program enrollment, diversity, completion, and employment and retention. So those are all metrics that we all have to track in order to ensure success and to continue to ask for funding. Otherwise, if we don't have outcomes, then more than likely they might look elsewhere.
One of the questions on the curriculum that you've outlined and put together had to do with CDL training, which is kind of a fundamental background for any highway construction. And how are you anticipating building that into the future in your program? And is there some guidance on the high school, programs as well that you mentioned?
So I'll start with this. I'm glad you asked. So this heavy highway training program, in partnership with Indiana Construction Roundtable Foundation, is one bucket of where we're spending our OJTSS dollars. We also have a whole nother CDL training program in partnership with Vincennes University. It is a 6-week training program, intensive. Students go through the CDL-A training. Those that don't complete the CDL have an option to earn the CDL-B. So we are already in that space. The real connection will be working in tandem with both VU and Chris's team to say, maybe there is a way that we can fit this puzzle together to continue to build out this horizontal pathway for students. Maybe they don't want to be a laborer or an operator. Maybe they want to drive a truck. Well, that is a significant need that we have as an agency, as a state, through local government as well. So, our CDL program, we've been running for about 6 years right now. I don't have the numbers on me, but I know we've seen a lot of success. We want to continue to expand on that success and really find ways to navigate students between the two in order to kind of promote pathways within highway construction and maintenance. So we are doing that. That's working. We're going to work out the details, but we are operating the same funding source right now to deliver to 2 programs. As far as high schools are concerned, it's a little bit more of a challenge because you're talking about a 17-year-old, maybe soon to be 18-year-old. And here in our state, granted, maybe Chris can chime in on this, but I didn't mention this because it's kind of a bit of information, but we have what's called graduation pathways requirements. And certain certifications fall in line with what is considered a graduation pathway for students. While CDL is one of the most in-demand jobs in the nation, and it is promoted through Indiana as a certification that can be funded through Next Level. As of right now, if I may be mistaken, it is not a graduation pathway qualifier for a high school student. So that's something that we want to figure out how to do. Maybe we get them in the summer when they turn 18 and provide them with that training, but those are ongoing discussions. Chris?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add other than it's just such a critical need for our industry, probably the most pressing need. So, conversations David and I have had is like, how can we figure out who has earned the credentials through Vincennes and just include them in hiring days that we're having or something, where it's just a really urgent need of the industries. And of course, everybody on this call knows that.
This has been a great discussion. I'm thinking, boy, maybe in the new year, we ought to think about a forum just on CDL. Because as long as for the past decade of my involvement in this work, it's a constant conversation and issue coming up. So the whole point of this is to start a lot of networking and conversation around this. I really appreciate both David and Chris, your time and handling the questions and contributions to this ongoing conversation, and we'll be continuing it. With you and with everyone else. We will be posting a link to the recording of this so that folks able to attend can share it with their colleagues. Those who couldn't attend will have a chance to do that. I've posted David and Chris's contact information in the chat. We'll also send that out in the follow-up email. And then a reminder to everyone that these conversations looking at the mobility workforce as a whole are going to continue every other week through mid-December with our next session on Wednesday, November 17th, Mobility and Equity in Indian Country and the Future of Tribal Technical Assistance. Again, very focused geographically, but a lot of critical issues that are shared certainly across the industry. On December 1st, we'll be looking at a really interesting assessment of the workforce around the case study of the Hernando de Soto Bridge in Memphis that was all too much in the news a while ago. And we'll wrap it up on December 15th with a look at the Road Safety Champion program. And so I hope everyone can join us for those future workshops. So again, thank you so much, David, Chris, and everyone for attending. We look forward to seeing you again in the future. All the best.
Thank you.
Thanks.